Before we begin this incredible journey, please take a moment to like this video. If you enjoy emotional sci-fi romance stories, subscribe to our channel for more amazing tales of love across the stars, and comment below telling us where in the world you're watching from. Your support means everything to us. Now let's dive into this extraordinary story. The observation deck of Colony Station Omega stretched endlessly before me, its crystalline walls offering a panoramic view of the star-swept void beyond. At 9 feet tall, with muscles sculpted by genetic enhancement and bones dense enough to withstand gravitational forces that would crush a normal human, I was considered the pinnacle of biological engineering. Yet as I pressed my massive palm against the cool surface of the viewing portal, I felt nothing but the familiar ache of emptiness that had become my constant companion. My name is Zara 7, though the scientist who created me simply called me Subject 7 for the first 20 years of my existence. I'm what they term a Titan-class enhanced human, genetically modified to be the perfect colonist for hostile worlds. My enhanced physiology allows me to survive in environments where regular humans would perish within minutes. My bones are 3 times denser than baseline human bone. My muscle fibers have been restructured to provide incredible strength, and my cardiovascular system can function efficiently in atmospheric pressures ranging from near vacuum to crushing depths. But there was one modification they couldn't perfect. One aspect of human nature that remained stubbornly resistant to their genetic tampering, the capacity for romantic love. Dr. Helena Vasquez, the lead geneticist on the Titan project, had explained it to me countless times with clinical detachment. The neurochemical pathways responsible for pair bonding proved incompatible with your enhanced neural architecture, Zara. The same modifications that give you superior cognitive processing and emotional stability have unfortunately suppressed your ability to form deep romantic attachments. You can feel friendship, loyalty, even familial love, but the specific cocktail of hormones and neurotransmitters that create romantic attraction, it simply doesn't function in your brain. For 32 years, I had accepted this as fact. I watched the other colonists, the unmodified humans, fall in love, marry, create families. I observed their rituals of courtship with the same detached interest a xenobiologist might show when studying the mating habits of alien species. It was fascinating from an academic standpoint, but it held no personal meaning for me. The colony administration had initially tried to pair me with other enhanced humans, thinking perhaps we might form some sort of companionate bond. There were 3 other Titans in our colony. Victor 3, a broad-shouldered man with cybernetic implants along his jaw; Naya 12, a woman whose skin had been modified to photosynthesize in certain light spectrums; and Rex 5, whose vocal cords had been altered to produce sounds in frequencies that could communicate with the native wildlife on hostile planets. We worked together efficiently. We shared meals and conversations about our missions, our modifications, our observations of the unmodified humans around us. But there was no spark, no chemistry, no pull toward one another beyond professional respect and mild friendship. We were like perfectly crafted tools that happened to be sentient, functional, reliable, but incapable of the messy, irrational passion that seemed to drive so much of human behavior. The loneliness was the hardest part. Not the simple absence of companionship, I had colleagues and acquaintances, but the deeper isolation that came from knowing I was fundamentally different from every other conscious being I had ever encountered. Even the other Titans, despite our similar modifications, had retained some capacity for deeper emotional connections with each other. I alone seemed to exist in a bubble of emotional numbness when it came to matters of the heart. I had thrown myself into my work with the dedication of someone who had nothing else to lose. My official role was as a planetary survey specialist, using my enhanced physiology to explore and catalogue potentially habitable worlds that would be too dangerous for unmodified humans. I had personally surveyed 17 different planets, spending months alone on each one, documenting everything from atmospheric composition to indigenous life forms. The work was fulfilling in its own way. There was a pure, almost meditative quality to being alone on an alien world, with nothing but my instruments and my thoughts for company. I had discovered 3 new species of silicon-based life forms, identified mineral deposits that had funded 2 new colony ships, and mapped gravitational anomalies that had advanced our understanding of planetary formation. The scientific community respected my work, and I took pride in my contributions to humanity's expansion into the galaxy. But on quiet nights like this, when the work was done and I had nothing to distract me from my own thoughts, the emptiness crept back in. I would watch the stars and wonder what it felt like to look at another person and feel that mysterious pull that the poets and songwriters seemed to think was the most important thing in the universe. What was it like to have your heart race at someone's touch? What did it mean to feel like another person completed you? The colony's common areas were always filled with couples and families. I had grown accustomed to being the odd one out at social gatherings. The gentle giant who was pleasant enough company, but who never quite fit in with the romantic dynamics that seemed to govern most adult social interaction. People were kind to me, but there was always an undercurrent of pity in their interactions, as if they were dealing with someone who was fundamentally broken. Dr. Vasquez had suggested that I consider it a blessing rather than a curse. "You're free from the complications that romantic attachment brings," she had said during one of our regular psychological evaluations. "You don't have to worry about jealousy, heartbreak, the compromises that come with trying to merge your life with another person's. You can focus entirely on your work, your personal growth, your contributions to the colony." Many people would envy that kind of emotional freedom. But I didn't feel free. I felt like I was watching life through a thick piece of glass, able to observe, but never truly participate in one of the most fundamental human experiences. The other colonists talked about love as if it were a force of nature, something that could transform your entire world in an instant. They spoke of finding their other half, of feeling complete for the first time, of love that was worth any sacrifice. I had tried to understand it intellectually. I had read poetry, watched romantic films, even attended wedding ceremonies to study the expressions on people's faces during the vows. But it was like trying to understand the concept of color while being completely blind. I could learn the vocabulary, memorize the descriptions, but the actual experience remained forever beyond my reach. The isolation was made worse by the fact that I was, by all accounts, physically attractive according to human standards. My genetic modifications had not only made me larger and stronger, but had refined my features to be aesthetically pleasing. My hair was a rich auburn that caught the light beautifully. My eyes were an unusual shade of green that people often commented on, and my facial structure had been subtly enhanced to achieve mathematical proportions that humans instinctively found appealing. Several unmodified humans had expressed romantic interest in me over the years. They were drawn to my unusual appearance, my quiet confidence, and perhaps the challenge of trying to win the affections of someone who seemed unattainable. But I had learned to recognize the signs early and gently discourage such attention. It felt cruel to allow someone to invest their emotions in me when I knew I could never reciprocate their feelings. There had been one particularly painful incident 3 years ago with a hydroponics engineer who had spent months trying to court me. His name was David, and he was everything that the romantic literature suggested I should find appealing: intelligent, kind, funny, and genuinely caring. He had been patient with my emotional distance, interpreting it as shyness rather than fundamental inability. He had brought me small gifts, invited me to dinners, shared his dreams of exploring the galaxy together. The night he finally confessed his love to me, standing under the artificial aurora that the colony's atmospheric processes created in the evening sky, I had felt nothing. Not the flutter of excitement, not the warmth of affection, not even the simple pleasure of being desired. I had looked into his hopeful eyes and felt only a hollow sadness for what I could never give him. "I'm sorry," I had told him, my voice gentle but firm. "I care about you as a friend, but I can't. I'm not capable of loving you the way you deserve to be loved." The hurt in his eyes had haunted me for months afterward. He had been kind about it, accepting my explanation with grace, but I had seen how my rejection had wounded him. He had transferred to another colony ship 6 months later, and I had heard, through mutual acquaintances, that he had found love with someone else. I was genuinely happy for him, but the incident had reinforced my decision to maintain emotional distance with potential romantic partners. Tonight, as I stood on the observation deck watching the stars wheel slowly overhead, I found myself wondering if Dr. Vasquez had been wrong. Not about my condition, the evidence for that was overwhelming, but about whether it was truly a blessing. Yes, I was free from the complications of romantic love, but I was also cut off from what seemed to be one of the most profound and transformative experiences available to conscious beings. I had watched my friend Yuki go through her courtship and marriage to Chen, one of the colony's engineers. The transformation in her had been remarkable. She had gone from being a competent but somewhat reserved botanist to someone who seemed to glow with inner light. She laughed more, smiled more, approached her work with renewed enthusiasm. Even during the difficult periods of their relationship, when they argued or faced challenges together, there was an aliveness in her that I envied. "It's like finding a missing piece of yourself that you didn't even know was missing," she had tried to explain to me once. "Suddenly everything makes more sense, has more meaning. It's not that my life was bad before Chen, but it was incomplete somehow, like I was only using half of my emotional range." I had nodded and smiled, pretending to understand, but her words had only deepened my sense of loss for something I had never possessed. The stars seemed particularly bright tonight, and I found myself wondering about the vast civilizations that might exist among them. Were there other species out there who struggled with questions of love and connection? Or was this uniquely human torment that my genetic modifications had trapped me in? Tomorrow, I would begin preparing for another survey mission, this time to a planet called Kepler 442c, which showed promising signs of habitability but had some unusual energy readings that required investigation. It would be good to get back to work, to lose myself in the familiar routines of exploration and discovery. But as I turned away from the observation deck to return to my quarters, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something essential about life, something that no amount of professional achievement could ever replace. The corridors of the colony ship were quiet at this hour, most of the residents having retired to spend time with their families or partners. I passed the recreation areas where couples sat together, talking quietly or simply enjoying each other's presence. My enhanced hearing picked up fragments of their conversations, gentle teasing, shared laughter, plans for the future. It all seemed to happen in a world parallel to mine, visible but forever inaccessible. Back in my quarters, I reviewed the preliminary data on Kepler 442c one more time before sleep. The planet was slightly larger than Earth, with a breathable atmosphere and what appeared to be vast oceans. The unusual energy reading suggested possible technological artifacts, though whether they were natural phenomena or evidence of intelligent life remained to be determined. It would be exactly the kind of challenging, solitary work that suited my abilities and temperament. As I settled into my bed, specially reinforced to accommodate my enhanced bone density, I allowed myself one last moment of wondering what it would feel like to have someone to share these discoveries with. Not just a colleague or fellow scientist, but someone who cared about my work because they cared about me. Someone whose presence could transform even the most routine day into something meaningful. But that was a fantasy for someone else, someone whose brain chemistry allowed for such connections. I was Zara 7, the perfect explorer, the ideal colonist, the woman who could survive anything the universe threw at her, except perhaps the simple human need to love and be loved in return. Tomorrow would bring new preparations, new challenges, new worlds to explore, and I would face them with the same competence and dedication I always had. But tonight, in the quiet darkness of my quarters, I allowed myself to grieve for the woman I might have been if the scientists had been just a little less thorough in their modifications, if they had left intact that one crucial piece of human nature that seemed to make all the difference between existing and truly living. 3 weeks later, I found myself standing on the bridge of the research vessel Meridian, watching Kepler 442c grow larger on the main view screen. The planet was indeed beautiful, swirled with blue oceans and white clouds, continents that seemed to pulse with an unusual violet energy signature that our sensors still couldn't fully explain. Whatever was generating those readings was unlike anything in our databases. "Final approach in 20 minutes, Zara," announced Captain Torres from her command chair. "All your equipment has been loaded into the shuttle. Are you sure you don't want to take a support team down with you? Those energy readings are unusual." I shook my head, checking the tablet that displayed my mission parameters one final time. "You know I work better alone, Captain. My enhanced physiology can handle whatever's down there, and if it turns out to be genuinely dangerous, better to risk one life than several." It was a conversation we'd had countless times before other missions. The truth was, I preferred the solitude of solo exploration, not just for safety reasons, but because it was the only time I felt truly at peace. Down on an alien world, with no one else around to remind me of what I lacked, I could simply be myself, without the constant awareness of my emotional limitations. The shuttle bay was bustling with final preparations when I arrived. My equipment, atmospheric analyzers, geological sampling tools, communication arrays, and enough supplies for a 6-month stay if necessary, had been loaded with typical military efficiency. I was conducting my final systems check when I heard a commotion near the bay doors. "Sir, please, you need to stay back from the loading area," one of the technicians was saying with barely contained frustration. I looked up to see the source of the disturbance and felt my breath catch in my throat. Not from any emotional response, I told myself, but simply from surprise at seeing someone so completely unlike anyone I had ever encountered. The being standing near my shuttle was tall, though still shorter than my 9 feet, with a graceful, elongated frame that suggested he wasn't quite human. His skin had a subtle luminescent quality, as if lit from within by a soft golden light. His hair was silver white and moved with an almost liquid quality, despite the absence of any breeze in the shuttle bay. But it was his eyes that were truly extraordinary, large, expressive, and colored a deep violet that seemed to shift and swirl like nebulae. Most striking of all was his face, which combined features that were recognizably humanoid with subtle differences that marked him as clearly alien. His cheekbones were higher than human norm, his jawline more delicate, and there was something about the proportions that was both familiar and exotic. He was, I realized with the detached part of my mind that catalogued such things, remarkably beautiful. "I apologize for the confusion," he was saying to the technician, his voice carrying a musical quality that I had never heard before. "I am Liran Diplomatic Observer Designation, but you may call me Kale. I have clearance to observe the planetary survey mission." He handed the technician a data pad, and I watched the man's expression change from irritation to surprise to respectful attention as he reviewed whatever credentials were displayed there. Yes, sir, of course, my apologies. Zara 7 is our lead surveyor." The technician gestured toward me. "She's the one conducting the mission to Kepler 442c. Those remarkable violet eyes turned toward me, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt something unprecedented happen in my chest. A tiny flutter, like the wings of some small creature stirring to life after a long hibernation. I told myself it was probably just surprise at encountering a new species, a natural biological response to novelty. Kyle approached me with fluid movements that seemed to defy the shuttle bay's artificial gravity. When he was close enough to speak without raising his voice, He stopped, and for reasons I couldn't begin to understand, smiled. It wasn't just any smile. It was warm, genuine, and somehow conveyed both respect and curiosity. It transformed his already striking features into something that made my enhanced heart rate increase in a way that had nothing to do with physical exertion. More unsettling still, I found myself smiling back without any conscious decision to do so. "You must be Zara 7, he said, and even my designation sounded somehow more personal when he spoke it. "I am honored to meet you. Your reputation as an explorer is well known even among my people." "Your people?" I managed, proud that my voice remained steady despite the strange sensations I was experiencing. "The Lyrans." I thought first contact protocols were still being negotiated. His smile widened slightly, and that flutter in my chest intensified. "They are, officially. But when our long-range sensors detected the same energy signatures on Kepler 442c that we've been tracking for decades, my government thought it wise to send an observer. The phenomena you're investigating may be connected to something of great importance to my species." "And they sent just one observer?" "I volunteered," he said simply. "I have personal reasons for wanting to understand these particular energy signatures. Plus, I have extensive experience with solo exploration, much like yourself, I believe." Something in his tone suggested there was more to that statement than mere professional experience, but before I could pursue the thought, Captain Torres's voice echoed through the shuttle bay, announcing final boarding call. "It seems our conversation will have to continue planetside," Kyle said, shouldering a pack that looked far too advanced to be of human manufacture. "I have been authorized to accompany you on this mission, if you're willing to accept a partner." Partner. The word sent another unexpected tremor through my nervous system. In 32 years, I had never had a true partner on any mission. I worked alone, reported alone, made decisions alone. The thought of sharing the intimate experience of planetary exploration with someone else, especially someone who seemed to affect me in ways I didn't understand, was both terrifying and oddly appealing. "I usually work alone," I heard myself saying, though my voice lacked its usual conviction. "As do I," he replied. "Perhaps we can be alone together." There was something about the way he phrased it that made perfect sense, even though it should have been contradictory. And when he smiled again, that same warm, transformative expression, I found myself nodding agreement before my rational mind could offer any objections. The descent to Kepler 442c's surface passed in relative silence, both of us absorbed in studying the approaching landscape through the shuttle's viewports. The energy readings grew stronger as we descended, and I noticed that Kale seemed to become more alert, more focused. Whatever these phenomena were, they clearly had special significance for him. We landed in a vast valley surrounded by crystalline formations that pulsed with the same violet energy we had detected from orbit. The atmosphere readings confirmed breathability for both human and, apparently, Lyran physiology. As we disembarked and began setting up our base camp, I found myself hyper-aware of Kale's presence in a way that was completely foreign to me. Everything about him seemed to fascinate my enhanced senses. The way he moved, with that unusual grace, as if he weighed less than he should. The musical quality of his voice when he asked questions about my equipment or made observations about the landscape. Even the subtle differences in his scent, something like ozone and starlight, if starlight had a smell. Most disturbing of all was the way he looked at me. Not with the clinical interest of a scientist studying an enhanced human, or the nervous curiosity of someone encountering a person they'd heard described as emotionally deficient. He looked at me the way I had seen unmodified humans look at each other when they were falling in love, with warmth, genuine interest, and something that might have been affection. It was impossible, of course. I was incapable of romantic attraction, and he was an alien whose emotional responses were probably completely different from human norms anyway. Whatever I was feeling was undoubtedly some sort of psychological reaction to encountering a new species, combined with the isolation of being on an unexplored planet. But as we worked together to establish our monitoring stations around the crystal formations, I couldn't deny that something unprecedented was happening to me. Every accidental brush of his fingers against mine when we handled equipment together sent small shocks through my nervous system. When he laughed at something I said, a sound like water over stones, I felt a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the planet's ambient temperature. Most unsettling of all was the growing conviction that he was experiencing something similar. I caught him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking, and there was something in his violet eyes that seemed to mirror the confusion and awakening that I was feeling. When our gazes met across the camp as we worked, neither of us looked away immediately, and the silence between us hummed with potential. On our third evening planetside, as we sat by our portable heater watching the alien constellations emerge in the darkening sky, Kyle finally broke the careful, professional distance we had been maintaining. "You're not what I expected," he said quietly, his voice carrying clearly in the thin air. "What did you expect?" I asked, genuinely curious. "The reports described you as brilliant, capable, fearless, but they also suggested you were emotionally limited, incapable of forming deep connections." He turned to look at me directly. "That doesn't match the person I've been working with these past few days." I felt heat rise in my cheeks, another unprecedented physical response. The reports were accurate. I am emotionally limited. My genetic modifications suppressed my capacity for romantic attachment. I can feel friendship, loyalty, professional respect, but not the deeper connections that drive so much of human behavior. "And what do you feel when you look at me?" The question was so direct, so unexpected, that I couldn't formulate my usual diplomatic deflection. Instead, I found myself being honest in a way that terrified me. "I don't know," I admitted. "Something I've never felt before, something that shouldn't be possible given my neurochemistry. When you smile, something happens in my chest that I can't explain. When you laugh, I want to find ways to make you do it again. When you're focused on your work, I find myself studying your face instead of concentrating on my own tasks." Kyle was quiet for a long moment, his luminescent skin seeming to glow more brightly in the gathering darkness. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft and wondering. "My people have a saying, the heart recognizes what the mind cannot understand. Perhaps what you're feeling isn't governed by human neurochemistry at all." "What do you mean?" Instead of answering immediately, he stood and moved closer to where I sat, close enough that I could see the way the starlight reflected in his extraordinary eyes. "May I show you something? It requires physical contact." Every rational part of my mind screamed warnings about unknown alien biology and the dangers of making contact with unfamiliar species. But the part of me that was experiencing these new, impossible feelings simply nodded. Kale knelt beside me and gently placed his hands on either side of my face. His skin was warm and incredibly soft, and the moment we made contact, I felt a jolt of sensation that was unlike anything in my experience. But this time, instead of the brief flutter I had been feeling, something much more profound began to happen. Images flashed through my mind, not my own memories, but someone else's. I saw myself through Kyle's eyes, but not as I appeared now. Instead, I saw myself as a young woman with unmodified human features, laughing in a garden filled with flowers I didn't recognize. I saw myself dancing under stars in a sky that wasn't Earth's, my hand in the hand of someone whose face I couldn't quite make out. I saw myself crying tears of joy as I held a child who had Kyle's luminescent skin and my green eyes. The images were vivid, emotionally intense, and filled with a love so profound it took my breath away. But they were impossible, memories of events that had never happened, of a version of myself that had never existed. When Kyle released his hold and the connection broke, I was trembling and had tears streaming down my face. What was that? Whose memories were those? Kyle's expression was a mixture of wonder and sadness. Among my people, we have the ability to share memories across lifetimes. When two souls are deeply connected, those memories can survive death and rebirth, waiting to be awakened in new incarnations. You're saying those were memories from past lives? That we've loved each other before? The memories suggest it's possible, he said carefully. But Zara, what you're feeling now, in this life, in this moment, that's not just remembered love. The way you respond to my smile, the way you look at me when you think I'm not watching, the way your whole demeanor changes when we're working together, that's happening in real time, with your mind and heart as they exist now. I stared at him, trying to process what he was suggesting. But that's impossible. My modifications. What if your modifications didn't remove your capacity for love? He asked gently. What if they only suppressed your ability to feel it for other humans? What if the reason you've never experienced romantic attraction before is because you were meant to love someone whose biology is different from human norms? The idea was so far-fetched, so contrary to everything I had believed about myself, that I should have dismissed it immediately. But as I sat there in the alien starlight, looking into the eyes of this remarkable being who had somehow awakened feelings I thought I could never have, I found myself wondering if it might actually be true. Even if that were possible, I said slowly, what would it mean? You'll return to your people when this mission is over. I'll go back to the colony. We come from different worlds, literally. Kyle's smile returned, that transformative expression that seemed to light up my entire world. The galaxy is vast, Zara, but it's also smaller than you might think. My people have been seeking connection with humans for generations. Perhaps what we're discovering here is exactly what both our species have been looking for. As if, in response to his words, the crystalline formations around our camp suddenly flared with brilliant violet light, pulsing in rhythm with something that felt suspiciously like a heartbeat. Whatever mysteries this planet held, whatever the energy signatures meant, I had the growing sense that our personal discovery was connected to something much larger than either of us had imagined. But in that moment, sitting under alien stars with impossible feelings blooming in my chest, the larger mysteries could wait. For the first time in my life, I was experiencing what the poets had tried to describe, what I had watched other people find, what I had believed was forever beyond my reach. I was falling in love, and amazingly, impossibly, it seemed, I was not falling alone. 6 months later, aboard colony ship Aurora, the joint human-Lyran research station on Kepler 442c had become the most important discovery of the century. The crystalline formations, we learned, were actually ancient memory archives left by a precursor species, repositories of consciousness that could bridge the gap between different forms of life across time and space. What Kale and I had experienced that first night was just the beginning of understanding how deeply interconnected all conscious life in the galaxy truly was. But for me, the most important discovery had nothing to do with ancient aliens or interspecies cooperation treaties. It was the simple, revolutionary realization that love, real, transformative, all-consuming love, had been possible for me all along. It had just been waiting for the right person to unlock it. As I stood on the observation deck of the Aurora, watching Kyle work with the human scientists to decode more of the memory archives, I reflected on how wrong Dr. Vasquez had been. My genetic modifications hadn't removed my capacity for love. They had simply made me incompatible with loving other humans. But with Kyle, every enhanced aspect of my physiology seemed perfectly designed to complement his Lyran biology. Our heart rates synchronized when we touched. Our enhanced senses were perfectly attuned to each other. Even our lifespans, extended by our respective genetic modifications, were remarkably similar. The scientists were calling us a proof of concept for human Lyran compatibility, the first successful interspecies pairing that suggested our two civilizations were more connected than anyone had imagined. But I knew the truth was simpler and more profound than any scientific study could capture. Sometimes love transcends not just individual differences, but the boundaries between species, between worlds, even between lifetimes. When Kyle looked up from his work and caught me watching him, his smile, that same transformative expression that had awakened my heart, still sent warmth flooding through my enhanced nervous system. And when he smiled back, I saw in his violet eyes the same wonder and gratitude that I felt every day. They had said, I could never love. They had been wrong about that, just as they had been wrong about so many things. Love, it turned out, was not limited by genetics or modifications or the boundaries of species. It was a force as vast and mysterious as the galaxy itself, capable of finding a way across any distance, through any obstacle, to connect hearts that were meant to be together. As Kyle set aside his work and walked toward me, his luminescent skin glowing softly in the starlight, I knew that my greatest discovery would never be catalogued in any scientific database. It was simply this, that even the most isolated heart could find its home if it was patient enough to wait for love to arrive, wearing an unexpected face. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, that love would come with a smile that could melt even the most carefully guarded heart, and memories of forever that proved some connections are truly eternal. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from our global audience. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible tales of love across the stars. Until next time, keep believing in the power of love to transcend any boundary.